Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Be the Bank. My name is Robert Heitha, your host, and you've found the best place on the internet to learn about the secondary mortgage market. My job with the Be the Bank show is to teach you everything that I know about this industry to maximize your chance of success and get you started or take you to the next level. So before we get into the show today, I want to thank the 65 members of our mastermind group. It's a very, very exciting group of like-minded investors working together to have success in this space, to do deals together, to partner, to share information. So we'll talk about the mastermind group in a little more detail very soon. But without further ado, let's get right into the show. All right, it's episode number 33 on May 26th. We're going to start the show with a new slide sharing the resources that FIXnotes offers to note investors both for free and for paid membership and consulting time. Then we're going to cover the overview of the industry. We're going to talk pricing, due diligence. Then we'll cover today's featured topic in the tech section of the show, which is on creating infinite leverage with content marketing. Then asset acquisition opportunities, show you how to become a vetted note buyer with USMR, my main client who I sell a lot of assets through. And of course, some case studies and then giveaways. All right, so before we jump into this first section, I want to share with you this beautiful day here outside of Philadelphia. Feeder number one at this point. Nobody's snacking over there. We also have the telephoto. In case we do get a bird over there, we're going to get a close-up view of that bird. And then finally, we've got the backyard cam. Oh, and look at our friend David Rose just basking in the sunlight over there, and then a couple big fish. That big one's almost the size of David. All right, so let's jump right into it. With this new slide I wanted to share with you, showing some of the things that we offer. Of course, our website, a resource for the industry, FIXnotes.com. And you can also find the mastermind group now, FIXnotes.com/MNM, and consulting, FIXnotes.com/consult. So we've got a whole bunch of great content for you on our website. We have our How to Invest in Mortgage Notes course, our industry news aggregator. We offer a limited mortgage note inventory for investors looking for assets for sale. And then if you move up to the mastermind group, which will someday be $990 per month. Right now, it's much less than that. Stay tuned for more. You can also get access to our private Podio workspace, which includes our events and Zoom calls and our vendor database and forums and our case studies, county and tax database, document templates and calculators, and of course the aggregated trade desk. And then also for consulting, I can share with you my expertise on a number of different topics, everything from real estate to mortgage notes specifically to online business and everything in between. And I'd be happy to help you take your business to the next level with the information that I've gathered over my 10 years of experience in real estate and mortgage notes. Now, like I said, it's not $990 per month. It's less than $100 per month right now. So for every 10 members, we increase the price by $10 in the mastermind group. You can lock in your monthly rate today at only $80 per month. We have 2 more seats available at $80 per month. And this mastermind membership also offers you 50% off consulting. So instead of $360 per hour, it's $180 per hour for members. And I fulfilled a lot of consulting time just this week on some due diligence projects and setting up some other, working with some members to set up their businesses for success. So definitely, if you're interested in any of these things, contact me for more information or just check out the website, FIXnotes.com/MNM or /consult for some more details there. All right, let's jump right into it here with the industry overview. Now, we're going to cover a couple slides that we've talked about previously here. For starters, the mortgage note investment options. So you know there are many, many ways to get involved in the mortgage note business. You can buy into a mortgage note fund. You can create an equity partnership with a private investor. You can buy partial reperforming loans. You can buy cash flowing whole loans. And you can buy and work out non-performing loans, which is the focus of this show. Now, buying and working out non-performing loans, the knowledge you will gain understanding the full life cycle of this process will benefit you in a number of ways throughout all of the other potential mortgage note opportunities. If you know how to buy and work out non-performing loans, you won't be scared if a reperformer that you buy goes into default. You'll also be much better suited to enter a partnership if you understand this full life cycle, understanding how to buy and work out non-performing loans. So that's going to be the focus of our show, and definitely the Be the Bank show is all about non-performing mortgage notes, both senior and junior. So when we talk about pricing in this industry, we talk about two main, well, there's really four, but two main categories: reperforming and non-performing. Reperforming loans are cash flowing just like a rental property that has a tenant in it. Every month you get a monthly mortgage payment from your borrower. Non-performing loans, on the other hand, are kind of like a fixer-upper, a home that's not ready to start generating income, and it's, in this case, a non-performing loan, a loan that is not making monthly payments. On the reperforming side, we get incentivized to take on more risk as investors. The higher the risk, the higher the return for the most part. Now, if you watch the show, you know that there are many, many ways to mitigate that risk, but in general, we see lower risk in seniors and consequently lower yields, whereas in juniors, we are offered higher yields for taking on more risk. In a junior position deal, you're behind the senior lien holder. And as you know, there's ways to mitigate that risk through due diligence, but in general, they're seen as riskier investments and therefore offer higher yields. On the non-performing side, it's more difficult to price because you're not pricing any cash flow, you're pricing the potential to begin a cash flow or collect a payoff of some kind. So on the non-performing side, we have senior liens priced on fair market value and junior liens priced on unpaid principal balance. Now, the reason we price seniors based on fair market value, this is the collateral value of the property, is because a lot of senior liens resolve through that property. And when you end up taking back an REO, or you need to work with a borrower to help them sell their home through a realtor, at the end of the day, this is the cap to your upside, is the value of the property. On the other hand, the unpaid principal balance is how we price junior liens, because the unpaid principal balance is generally what we work to collect when we're working with the homeowner. More junior liens resolve through the borrower versus through the collateral. We see a lot more of these win-win resolutions where we're able to put a modification agreement in place or negotiate a discounted settlement when we're buying junior liens. So in general, this is the market pricing that I'm seeing for May. There's pretty broad ranges here because there's a lot of due diligence that refines that price into what the market values a specific asset. And that's where we'll talk about the non-performing waterfall evaluation. So this is a slide you guys hopefully know and love if you've seen the show before, and it starts with secured versus unsecured. When we're reviewing a portfolio of assets for sale, the first thing we want to know is whether or not we have leverage, whether we have the ability to foreclose through a secured loan. An unsecured loan is still collectible through the promissory note, but there's no leverage. There's no potential to foreclose on the collateral because the borrower no longer owns that collateral in most cases, and we'll get into that shortly. Once we know it's secured, then we determine its lien position, we determine the collateral value, then we move on to the bankruptcy status, and then occupancy, which is where we left off on the previous episode. Episode number 32 covered bankruptcy, 31 we covered collateral value, episode 30 was lien position, and episode 29 we talked about secured and unsecured. So today's episode we're going to jump into occupancy, but just as a quick recap, secured equals the property owner is the borrower. This essentially means that when a borrower still owns the subject property that's securing the mortgage that they signed when it was originated, then it's most likely secured. Now, you can go back to episode 29 for a whole bunch more information about this specific process, some of the false positives and false negatives that you might see, a loan that looks unsecured but is actually secured, or vice versa. And then we go through some tactical ways to actually determine property ownership. So definitely tune into episode 29 for some of that information. Episode 30, we talked about firsts versus seconds and why I believe smart money prefers junior position. There's a lot of advantages to junior liens. You can diversify. You can diversify a lot more than in senior. The due diligence expenses are lower. You're able to do it without taking back the collateral in most cases, borrower-centric resolutions versus property-centric. There's a whole bunch of advantages to junior liens, but a good portfolio can diversify between the both. And we do cover first and seconds on this show. In fact, a lot of our case studies in the past have been on first liens. Today's case studies are both juniors though, but we'll get into that soon. The following episode, I believe episode 31 maybe, was collateral valuation methods. So we talked about some free versus paid resources that we use to calculate the appropriate value of a property. So on the free side, we talked about AVMs and some paid AVMs, then recently sold comps in the middle, and then desktop appraisals, and then finally BPOs or brokers' price opinions on the far side, getting to more accurate paid sources. Now, if you tune back into that previous episode, you will find that I advocate the recently sold comps manual review method. I believe you can get a really good balance of using your own time. So it's almost free, but you are spending your own time to analyze what's available for sale in the current market and what has been recently sold to determine the value of a property. This is a lot more accurate in an urban area versus a rural area, but without that caveat, you are able to find some detail even on the most rural homes, as long as there's been some activity on the MLS in that time. So after we went through collateral valuation methods, we talked about bankruptcy, chapter 7 versus chapter 13. I believe this was in episode 32. And we kind of went over the details and what to understand when you get into a situation where the borrower files for bankruptcy, or if you're buying a loan that maybe already is in bankruptcy. Now, the Office of the Comptroller, the Office of the Currency Comptroller, the OCC, they actually do not recommend the sales of bankruptcy debts. They don't recommend selling loans or buying loans that have been through a bankruptcy. So this maybe is not going to be a factor for you if you're buying loans that are maybe performing and have no risk of bankruptcy, but it's very important to understand buying non-performing loans because these borrowers could file for bankruptcy and you need to know what to expect. So in that previous episode, we went over some tactical step-by-step instructions on determining bankruptcy and reviewing, very importantly, the Schedule D, which is the Register of Secured Claims, and you will find mortgage loans as part of that schedule on the voluntary petition. So this week, let's bring us up to speed. We're back on the non-performing waterfall evaluation, and we're talking about occupancy. And occupancy is pretty simple. It's whether or not the home has a current occupant, either the borrower or a tenant, or maybe it's vacant. So the way we determine this occupancy triangulation process is by gathering a bunch of different data points from a bunch of different resources and then comparing the different results that we get to hone in on what we believe to be the most accurate possible occupancy for that subject property. So an unknown result is still possible. You can spend a lot of time reviewing all these data sources and still end up with an unknown status, but by reviewing the more data points, the better. And essentially, hopefully, you will be able to determine with a good degree of accuracy what's happening with that subject property. So owner occupancy, that's the top of that's the top end. That's what we're looking for when the borrower who owes the mortgage is actually living in the property securing that mortgage. But it's not always that case, and sometimes the property may be vacant, which could result in deferred maintenance, township fees, violations, and potentially a strategic default on the borrower's end. They maybe just left the property, stopped paying their mortgage, put their hands up and said, I don't want anything to do with it. That is a possibility. But the way to determine what's actually going on is by reviewing many different data sources. So the first place I'd like to always look is the county tax record. The county tax record is a great place to start because it has the address and the name of the person responsible for a specific property's public taxes. And it's all available to you online. In most counties, I've never seen a county where you don't have that information to you. But essentially, you look up the parcel number or the property address for your subject property securing the actual loan or the mortgage note that you're looking to purchase, and you see who is listed as the responsible party to pay those taxes. It will include their address, so if that address matches the subject property, then they're sending the tax bill to that property, to the owner of the property. So you can determine pretty well that it's owner occupied. If it is not owner occupied, that address will not match. Perhaps they're sending the tax bill for the subject property to another home in the town, or maybe it's not even in that town and it's an absentee type of owner. But you can determine that by looking at the county tax record. You can also look at the bankruptcy petition. If that's the case and the bankruptcy petition has been filed recently, there's a lot of information there. And that would be, if it's very recent, the most accurate source, because that's what the borrower and the borrower's bankruptcy attorney have provided to the courts. So they're swearing that it's accurate and you can trust it. Now, a Google search can be a little bit hit or miss. I definitely recommend using skip trace when possible. If you have access to skip trace vendors like TLO or Accurant or IDI, but Google can provide some kind of free type of skip tracing from different websites. So it's a good idea to either Google the borrower's name or the property address and see what information you can gather there. Social media, also possible if the borrower has a public profile, you can see where they're listed as far as what location. It also is rather hit or miss, but you can get an idea using these resources that are available to us today. And then credit reports include 3 different addresses, a current address and previous addresses, and you can use that to determine another data point whether or not the borrower is living in the subject property. But skip trace is really going to be your best bet for the most part. Skip trace reports normally come with utilities information, so you can see who's paying the utility bill. They'll come with all of the various credit reporting and all the different sources. These skip tracing vendors like TLO aggregate them into a comprehensive report that you can review for a lot more information than just occupancy. Voter registration, vehicle registration, criminal record, I mean, the list goes on. And as a note investor, we have permissible use when analyzing a loan available for sale. And part of that is underwriting or re-underwriting the borrower's ability to repay, and skip tracing can be part of that. So the potential result here is going to either be owner-occupied or non-owner occupied. And if you can refine that result a little bit more, if it comes up as non-owner occupied, you'd want to know if it's vacant or tenant occupied, or maybe it's a borrower's second home. But by combining all of these different resources, you're able to determine to the best of your ability what the occupancy status is likely to be. Now, once you actually own the loan, you can take this a step further by sending out a licensed door knocker. A door knocker can deliver papers to the borrower on behalf of the loan servicer or mortgage holder and have a short conversation with that homeowner or whoever's living in the property to determine whether they are the borrower on record or perhaps a tenant or maybe even a squatter. Now, we actually talked about squatters on our most recent Mastermind members only call last month. We talked about REO management and really got into the details with one of our members who's flipped thousands and thousands of properties, so is very intimate with the REO process and now is a big time note investor. So definitely I'll talk more about the Mastermind group later in the call, but definitely consider that if you want to take your business to the next level. All right, so before we get into the next slide, let's just go around the horn here and see if we got any bird friends. Nothing over there, so the telephoto is pretty useless so far. Let's check the backyard. There's our big fish. David's hiding somewhere. All right, kind of a quiet day here out on the bird feeder. All right, so let's jump into the next slide here and get on with, is this tech tips already? Awesome, so we're gonna talk tech tips and we're gonna go through the familiar slide if you've watched the show before. Starting with hardware, if you have a capable PC or Mac, a decent smartphone, and a fast Wi-Fi or cellular connection, you can leverage all of these amazing softwares and web services, which either are on your computer like Excel or just in the cloud like Podio, to leverage all this technology and be efficient in managing a nationwide portfolio of mortgage notes. These are the solutions that I use for both due diligence and portfolio management. There's so much that you can do with this, especially with things like Podio and Globaflow, which it was previously called Citrix Podio Workflow Automation now, to create automations and workflow, or you can use Zapier to create these API connections without even knowing how to code. I've used Zapier to connect Podio to Google Sheets, back to Right Signature, and connect all the dots so that you're able to do things very efficiently and in an automated fashion. So we've went through a lot of these different software and web services in the past. We've really dug into like the reports you receive from CoreLogic or DataTree. We've talked about some really great tips with ProTitle USA. We've talked about TLO skip tracing just today. TransUnion purchased TLO XP, so you can actually get credit reports and skip tracing from one vendor now. Quick tip there, you do need an office with a site visit to approve you for this type of product. Then we've got a bunch of other services like Pacer, which we talked about, public access to court electronic records to review bankruptcy data. So much we can do with things like Zillow to determine the value of the properties that we're analyzing in our due diligence process. But today we're going to take a step back. We're going to be talking about this content marketing strategy. So content marketing is a really amazing thing to leverage our time in the 21st century using the internet. And unless you're managing hundreds and hundreds of non-performing loans in various stages of resolution, a note investor does have a lot of time in between portfolio management to focus on business development. And without focusing on relationships and deal flow, and of course your processes, procedures, and systems to develop and refine, your success in this business will be short-lived without that focus on relationships. So in this episode, I'm outlining a strategy for business development based on longevity and leverage. So we're going to talk about how to create and publish valuable content to attract and motivate the counterparties that your business relies on. So I want to look at an article that I found the other day here. I actually titled my show Content Marketing for Infinite Leverage, and then just Googled infinite leverage and found there's an interesting article from Andrew Yu on what this new age we live in is all about. So definitely check this out. If you just Google Age of Infinite Leverage, you'll find it. But I wanted to skim through and talk about how leverage is something that is so much more easily accessible than it has ever been before. So essentially, you want to make today's labor tomorrow's leverage, which just means to think about your future self, make their life easier, make your future life easier by doing things today that set you up for tomorrow. So that really creates, and leverage is a simple equation. We talk about leverage with regards to debt. We also talk about leverage with regard to labor and with regard to capital. But in the past, a one-to-one relationship between labor and leverage was pretty standard. But with a lever, that one-to-one becomes 1-to-5 or 1-to-10 or 1-to-100. And with the internet, it can be 1-to-millions. And you're essentially increasing your input to output ratio by applying efforts and skills into activities that offer you the greatest output. It's also kind of hand in hand with the Pareto principle, the 80-20 law, where 20% of your effort results in 80% of your results. But this is actually a way to kind of hijack that to make it even more effective, your time. And so for the majority of humanity, leverage was not a thing. You put in 8 hours of work, you get 8 hours of output. But with all of the invention that has happened in the 21st century through capital, cooperation, technology, productivity, we're able to output much more than our inputs, especially through internet, the technology. So old school leverage, costly and permission required. Labor leverage and capital leverage were things that industrialists have been operating on since the Industrial Revolution. But today, because of the internet revolution, it's a permissionless form. This is no longer the case. You don't have to stand in line to get a job with Gatekeepers Incorporated. New school leverage means that you're able to upload a YouTube video or send a tweet or post on social media or write a blog post with no permission. You can create an account, you can put your information out there, and if people come and see it, you're leveraging your time to potentially to the millions. So this is showing you coding, which coding is a super high leverage activity. But it can also be tweeting or videos. And by putting in, a little bit of time to record a podcast or to write a blog post, you're opening yourself up to be read or listened to or watched by millions of people around the world. And what's even cooler than that is it's timeless. I mean, we'll see what time will tell. But for the most part, a platform like YouTube has already been around for over a decade, and we assume and hope that they'll continue to be around. So this video could be watched by people long into the future. Now, if you are watching this live, feel free to leave a comment. We present it live every week. If you're watching the recording, type in a question below. I'd be happy to answer it. But what this does for me by producing these videos, now on episode number 33, is creates basically 33 different versions of myself that are constantly presenting this information to the world 24/7, 365. Anyone can come to YouTube, to my link, access my videos, and get some information from me. So this is what I'm encouraging you to do. And we'll talk about really tactically what that means in just a minute. But it's can be applied in any industry to create thought leadership, to create content that then attracts the right counterparties. So we'll just skim through here and talk about how stacking your leverage can put leverage on top of leverage. Hiring a virtual assistant who does some of your proofreading and your editing can further enhance your outputs. There's so much that we can do through the technology that makes this. If you're not doing this, I honestly believe you'll be left behind. And I don't want to sound too doom and gloom here, but if you're watching this show, I would encourage you to think in terms of this 80-20 Pareto principle, think in terms of leverage, and use your abilities to create a higher level of output. Similar to our episode about AI and how being below the curve there is a very, very difficult position to be in going forward as technology continues to advance. So really great article by Andrew Yu. I'd encourage you to check it out. But essentially, it's content strategy. And what it means is infinite leverage by multiplying your efforts. So let's get into the tactical here. Who should you be creating content for? So there's a bunch of different counterparties in this business, and I'm going to just go over 4 of them here and talk about some different types of content that you can apply to attract the right counterparties in this space. So for starters, note sellers. We all are looking for new sellers of mortgage notes, and they could be private owners, they could be servicers and attorneys, they could be hedge funds, they could be banks and credit unions, but they're all people who are out there perhaps with a distressed portfolio and maybe are looking for information on how to either monetize it, how to sell it, and we'll get into some specific content types in a minute here. We also have borrowers. At the end of the day, we're trying to help borrowers. So helping borrowers who may be thinking about the strategic default strategy, or maybe are in a position to short sell a property, or maybe they're already in a pre-foreclosure, you're able to provide a resource to these borrowers that could potentially help not only the borrowers who are in your portfolio, but also could become somewhat of an expert in general across other borrowers and other investors' portfolios. Potential partners are a great place to focus on content, because if you're looking for a capital raise, or if you're looking for buyers of notes, for example, targeting passive and active investors and family offices could create a lot of doors, open a lot of doors of opportunity for you. And then there's vendors and service providers. We're able to manage this business nationwide because we work with credit bureaus and skip trace vendors and title and tax researchers and realtors and attorneys and servicers, and the list goes on. So by creating content for these types of counterparties, you're able to attract the right business partners for your business. So let's kind of drill down and talk about what that actually means. And we'll switch to this one. So there's a couple things to identify when you're thinking in terms of what type of content to create. You can identify problems and opportunities, you can identify solutions, and then you can create some more context around why I work with you specifically. So for problems and opportunities, we're talking about thought leadership, presenting trends and data, presenting benchmarks, news reports, expert commentary on the latest developments in the marketplace. There's so many things you can do just around value add content. You're not really thinking in terms of like what's in it for you. You're thinking in terms of what you can provide to the marketplace. And with enough of this type of effort, you will develop a position of thought leadership, which then you can leverage into other opportunities. Like, for example, presenting solutions. And by providing education and sometimes pitching, upselling, you're able to create content that actually has more of an actionable end goal for the reader or watcher or listener. So focused courses, how-to guides, troubleshooting documents, custom offers, for example, are some different ways that you can provide solutions. For my business, I have a course called How to Invest in Mortgage Notes that I offer for free. The course is essentially a compilation of how-to guides for different aspects of the business. And then troubleshooting I think of as more of a specific thing. For example, if you're going to Google a question because you have a very, very specific thing, a trouble that you're working on, you could essentially create articles or blog posts or podcast episodes or YouTube videos that are very specific to a specific problem, so that when someone Googles the problem that they have, you're the result that specifically addresses that issue. Custom offers can be a little bit more unique, a little bit more. There's a little less leverage in custom offers because some of it maybe would require your own labor. But of course, if you hire a virtual assistant, you can apply that labor leverage as well. But a custom offer is something like a portfolio analysis, where a potential seller could send you a spreadsheet and you could provide a custom portfolio analysis. Next, we have credentials and proof for why work with you. Now, this is some content like case studies and testimonials. You could do a portfolio review or a trial engagement if you have some product or service that you can offer on a limited basis. And these types of credential and proof content types are very good to then pivot from just providing the information to then taking the next step to actually get a new client or a new partner, a new loan seller, or a new vendor in your business. So let's go over a couple types of examples here. For note sellers, I'm thinking in terms of like a market pricing guide, or I said this before, a complimentary portfolio analysis, or a guide how to monetize bad debt. For borrowers, you can set their expectations around what happens when they go into default and stop paying their loan. You can talk about how to negotiate a settlement with a note buyer. You can educate them on a deficiency balance so that they understand that a strategic default will still leave them susceptible to an unsecured judgment. A deficiency balance would follow them even after something like a foreclosure on the property. For potential partners, you could produce case studies and portfolio track records looking at your own results. You could review the life cycle of a non-performing note. You could review your investor reports and create press releases. For vendors and service partners, you could create a how-to guide for working with private note buyers, or you could work with industry expectations for non-performing loan workouts. So you could educate different vendors and service partners about what to expect in the business, or how to vet a new note investor client. You can essentially train your potential partners on how to be the best partner or service provider for you based on your experience in the industry with other partners. So the general gist of this is that in order to attract the right types of people, you need to put yourself out there as a thought leader, as an expert in the space, and we've talked about this many, many times already in the past, to provide in the beginning of your life cycle as a note investor, kind of a diary or a play-by-play on what you're doing to get into this business. By documenting your efforts to become a note investor, you're attracting people who are interested in the improvement and the development, and also in real estate and mortgage notes, that could someday become future partners. So all of this content was more focused on thought leadership and more, I think, advanced positioning in the marketplace as far as your reputation. But when you look back at like episode 15, I believe, of this show, we talked about some of the different types of content that you can provide as a beginner in this space. So please do not feel at all like content marketing is reserved for people who are experts. It can also be done more like a vlog or a log of your activities in the space and what you're doing to find success so that you can attract the right partners to work with. And that could take the form of a blog post, or posting on forums like Bigger Pockets or Connected Investors, or even in the various Facebook groups on mortgage note investing or real estate investing. So many different ways to produce content. But at the end of the day, this is so exciting because content marketing lets you multiply your efforts. A video like this can be watched again and again and again by millions of people. I wish we get millions of views, but by hundreds of people. And it can be a great benefit to you in your business development and developing relationships going forward. Let's take a break there and look at the birds. Oh yeah, we've got a woodpecker on the other side. He's hiding, but that's a big one. I think we're not going to get a view with the telephoto. Oops. We've got a view of his foot. That's a beautiful bird. I'm glad we are seeing at least one bird today. And I saw a cardinal just fly over, so maybe he'll come down. Oh, there he is. That's the cardinal. Let me zoom out a bit. Oops. Oh, he flew away. We missed the... Oh, and there's a house sparrow. It's nice to take a little break from from the content, just to decompress for a minute, enjoy the nature. Oh my gosh, a bluebird! I'm so glad we're looking at this. Let's check. Oh, there he goes. The bluebird's a little bit more rare around here, and definitely a great feathered friend to see from time to time. So I'm glad I got to show you that. All right, so let's jump into our next phase, which is assets for sale. So we've got a couple opportunities to acquire loans going forward. I'm expecting we'll have an offering from my clients through FIXnotes in late summer, some non-performing second liens and perhaps some first liens as well. That's still TBD, but what you can do to guarantee access to portfolios of mortgage notes for sale is you can join the mastermind. So my clients release assets. My primary client releases assets about once every quarter, but in between I have other note investors who come to me to help sell product. I actually just put out 3 loans for an investor last week, already getting bids on that. And then we have another investor who's come out to me to list a couple more loans for sale. in the near future. So those are all available to the mastermind group. Now, sometimes if the mastermind group doesn't move forward on a deal, which is unlikely, I think all of these assets are going to be sold directly to the mastermind, we would release them to the rest of the non-disclosure agreement signers, which is free, by the way, at fixnotes.com/buy. You can sign the NDA and get access to future opportunities. But to be the first on the list and to see more than everybody else, you definitely should join the mastermind while the price is discounted. And of course, with Mastermind, there's the aggregated trade desk. We've listed over $11.7 billion of unpaid principal balance in 2021 alone. These are opportunities from all over the marketplace, and essentially we introduce you to different market intermediaries or brokers or loan sellers so that you can conduct those deals directly, make a new contact, and then have some future opportunities going forward. So a lot of different ways to get into this business by acquiring non-performing or even reperforming loans. And I would highly recommend the Mastermind as a great place to start once you're serious about getting into the business. All right, so let's jump into the case studies here. And we've got 2 case studies, both non-performing seconds today. First, we're gonna start with a single family residential on NPL second that resulted in a full payoff. Now, this might be the highest payoff we've received as far as the case studies we've presented on the show, $333,900. So this was a huge deal. Really big payoff, a full payoff, and it resulted from these numbers. We've got a fair market value of $887,000. We've got a senior lien balance of about $598,000. So that leaves $289,238 of equity. Now that's what's protecting our unpaid principal balance of $333,900. So it's not full equity. It's a partial equity situation, but it's almost entirely covered, and you'll see it actually was covered, and we got the full payoff. So this loan cost us $120,000 to acquire as a non-performer, and it resulted in that $333,000 payoff. So let's jump into it with 3 questions. We ask every borrower, what happened, where are you now, and what do you want to do? I thought I saw a blue jay I wanted to show you, but no blue jay. So these questions are so important because it lets us frame the conversation in terms of what the borrower needs. Now, if you go into this business thinking in terms of what you want and not what the borrower wants, you're going to be in some trouble for many reasons. For starters, there's a lot of friction there fighting against the person who owns the property. But there's also just not good vibes from trying to cram a square peg into a round hole. When we work with our borrowers based on these 3 questions, we're able to create win-win resolutions that benefit all of the counterparties. And at the end of the day, that's why we are in this business. Of course, we can make money, we can create cash flow, but we're fulfilling a purpose here. We are filling in the gap where the banks failed so that we can resolve the debts that they were unable to, helping the borrowers out, getting them back to a performing cash flowing situation, or getting them into a payoff situation like this case study. So in this case, it's pretty easy. What happened? Well, they've already listed the property for sale. It was actually MLS listed prior to the note being sold, and the borrower's paying the senior lien. There's plenty of equity here. So, well, plenty of equity with the caveat that it looks sort of partial equity based on these numbers, but the property value is a lot more than we actually thought. So the borrower is under contract for more than the fair market value estimated, and they requested from us the payoff quote for a full payoff. No short sale necessary here. It was a pretty quick deal, and you'll see that in a minute. It only took 2 months to settle this one and paying it off at settlement. So we spent about $120,000, 36% of the unpaid principal balance to acquire the loan, and over 2 months and $425 of expenses, we went through our due diligence process, onboarding the loan with our servicer and the collection process to result in that $333,000 payoff. So a couple other considerations, some takeaways here. This was part of a large bulk purchase. So the acquisition price was discounted due to the volume here. This wouldn't be a deal that you could pick off as a one-off. Most investors, when they sell one-offs, they're very intimately aware of what's going on. They would know that this was MLS listed and it was only a matter of time until it did pay off. But because this was in a large bulk purchase, there was somewhat of a pricing discount and of course an advantage of low-hanging fruit, we call it, like this. Quick payoff where the borrower just needs to know where to send the check. Now, a high UPB loan like this does offer higher risk and a higher reward scenario versus diversifying into smaller loans. Pricing is discounted for larger balance loans because a lot of investors don't feel like it's a good use of their resources to spend $120,000 on one loan when you could essentially buy a whole portfolio of 10, 15 assets for that price, which would spread your risk across a number of different assets. And in the worst case scenario here, where it was a total loss, you wouldn't have all your eggs here in one basket. Now, in this case, the MLS listing status was really the key factor here. And I would definitely recommend reviewing MLS listing statuses as part of your due diligence process. There's a couple ways to do that. Data Tree does tell you whether it's pre-REO or in a foreclosure or if it's MLS listed. So if you're reviewing all your properties on Data Tree, you can see that information there. And of course, Zillow will show you if it's listed or not on the MLS. So definitely look at Zillow when you're doing your property analysis and take a note, add another column to your spreadsheet with that listing status, the listing amount. And by the way, when you're doing your due diligence and adding things to a spreadsheet, be very specific about the fields. Don't just have one field with amalgamation of data. You want to have specific fields for specific data so that you're able to filter larger portfolios or upload that information into a management platform like Podio, where everything lives in the correct field. So be very fastidious, be very deliberate about how you capture the information. Like when we talked about occupancy status, you're adding separate columns for all of those different vendors when you're taking different occupancy status details. And then you can compare them all rather than have it all in some text field that's unable to be parsed through. So in this case, since it was MLS listed and we confirmed that the senior balance was substantially lower than the amount, there was plenty of equity there, we had a pretty high degree of probability here that it would be a full payoff when the property was eventually sold, and it was. So in this case, that was a 380% internal rate of return for the non-performing loan resolution. And the reason that was such a high return was because it only took 2 months. Now, $333,000 on a $120,000 investment, that's a great turnaround even if it took you a year. The IRR would be lower, but because it was a very quick turnaround here, the internal rate of return was very high. So let's jump over to another non-performing second single-family residential case study. This time, though, we're talking about a loan sale. So in the past, we've done a lot of loan sale case studies on reperforming loans. And we talk about that fix and flip model where you fix up a non-performer and you sell it to a cash flow investor who's looking for a reperforming asset. In this case, this was a loan that we sold as a non-performing loan for $14,361. So the metrics on this one, it's a $246,000 fair market value. That's what the home was worth. Senior lien was owed $143,000, which leaves over $100,000 of equity, covering a UPB of $31,000. So that's more than 3x equity coverage. Very, very safe deal as far as your leverage as a note investor buying the second lien. So in this case, it was not a bulk sale. This was a small non-performing portfolio sale, but it was close to bulk pricing because this was actually a mastermind member deal. Due diligence findings, the senior in this case was 30 days late, but because there's so much equity to spare, it was more priced closer to a senior current deal. And 30 days late isn't super late, but as you know, with junior liens, the status of the senior is going to be the biggest driver of price along with the equity. In this case, the borrower actually had made contact previously with my client who was selling this loan. They let us know they were unemployed due to COVID, but they were interested in modifying the loan at $100 per month. It was not finalized. That modification agreement didn't pan out because we countered at $236 per month. The borrower couldn't make that work. We did talk about the idea of a 6-month trial mod where he'd pay $600 over 6 months and then increase to $236 when he was back to work. But for whatever reason, it did not pan out, and we were able to sell this loan to an investor who was going to be a little bit more proactive in getting this deal resolved. So at the end of the day, they ended up purchasing the loan for $14,000 in order to pursue the modification agreement. So let's look at a couple other considerations here. First one is if you collected $100 per month and you spent $14,000, you'd be earning about 7% of your money back every year. That's the cash on cash net of servicing fees that you'd expect. So not a terrible yield when you compare it to, like a dividend yield on a equity or something, but not what we're looking for in notes. Now at 236, that would have been an 18% yield. An 18% yield is more in the range of what I'd expect from a cash flowing second lien. But in this case, because of the amount of leverage, the note investor has a lot of opportunity here as to which direction they're going to take. And of course, because the borrower does intend to stay in the property, that's probably going to be the best bet. But there are some other things that could be strategized here. For example, a hardship withdrawal from a 401k, or, and we talk about this in the last slide, an interest-only modification. There's some options here. As I mentioned, this was a mastermind member who purchased this loan. This was part of a population called the mastermind exclusive inventory. So as I mentioned before, anyone who signs the non-disclosure agreement at FIXnotes.com/buy gets access to our about quarterly distribution of loans for sale. At the same time, the mastermind members get a distribution of everything in the portfolio from my clients, including loans like this that are in some phase of resolution. So the non-performing loans that we list to the general market are normally, there's not really anything going on. There's strictly non-performers. But for the mastermind group, we give access to all of the assets with all of the contact details and the history behind those loans and what's actually going on. So then they can get into positions to step into our shoes in a foreclosure or into our shoes as far as a modification agreement like this. And in this case, you wouldn't have access to this if you were not part of the mastermind group. A COVID forbearance is a possibility on this one since the borrower did lose their job due to COVID. But the borrower previously expressed interest in making monthly payments, so you could also structure it as an interest-only modification. An interest-only mod would be like a trial temporary modification where the borrower just is paying their interest every month. They're not paying any principal balance down. So that's another possibility here, which would offer a lower net cash on cash to the investor, but would keep the UPB from decreasing. So then when they do set up a regular amortizing modification agreement, they'd be paying down that higher balance. So in this case, they bought it for 45 cents on the dollar, $14,361, and they can take the next step either to foreclose, to get the borrower back on track, or to do some softer outreach to get the conversation and the ball rolling again to put a modification in place. So that's it for our case studies today. Let's take a look at the backyard again. All the fish are kind of like swarming where I feed them normally. I think they're hungry, waiting for something. Check the birds. Nobody. And of course, oh, there we go. The bluebird's back. The bluebird is hanging out right on the top of that feeder. And he'll probably jump down in a minute and try to get some seeds. And maybe we can even see him with the telephoto. I'm going to try to, let's see if I can get a good shot of him. Pretty close, pretty close. It's tough to focus that giant telescope. I've got, oops, not that screen. I've got a camera here, camera over here, which you can't see. And it's like actually a telescope that's attached to a camera mount. So unfortunately, we didn't really get a good clear view of that bluebird. But very exciting nonetheless. We love to see the bluebirds around here. And that's it for our case studies. So I think the last bit of the show here is giveaways, of course, the consultation calls. Every week we offer 15-minute consultations to interested investors, interested business owners, people who want to pick my brain on various ways that they can either leverage technology in their business or invest in mortgage notes or real estate. So I'd be very much appreciative if you would subscribe, like this video, and comment if you have a question, or just leave a comment of some kind. It really does help. And then you can book a consultation with me over at robbymax.youcanbook.me. You'll find my calendar there and you can pick a time and we can get to know each other a little bit better. Whatever I can do to add the most benefit to your business, I'd be happy to help. Now, our upcoming schedule, we do have our mastermind call on the last Wednesday of every month. And we've got our Be the Bank show, mastermind calls on the first Wednesday, Be the Bank on the last Wednesday. Coming up on June 2nd is our next mastermind call. We've got two amazing speakers lined up, really great industry contacts, both part of the mastermind group. The mastermind calls are always with members, and we've had some really amazing members as part of our monthly calls sharing their immense knowledge. Then we've got our final Wednesday of the month, Be the Bank show coming up on June 30th. So definitely consider joining the mastermind group. And there's a little titmouse. I saw him out of the corner of my eye, so that was the tufted titmouse. Okay, so this slide is kind of messed up, but this is the slide we showed in the beginning of the call here. The FIXnotes.com/MNM for the mastermind, FIXnotes.com/consult for consulting with me, a whole bunch of content that you can unlock when you join the mastermind group, and then consulting time at half price for mastermind members. And of course, if you see this here, right there, plus $10 for every 10 members. Right now, the mastermind membership is $80 per month. We have 2 more spots available at $80, and then it moves up to $90 per month for the next 10 members. You can lock in your monthly rate now. With every 10 members, it continues to increase. It'll eventually be over $10,000 per year, $990 per month to join this group. But if you lock in your rate now, you'll be set for life. And that will give you access to all of our events in the future. Right now, they're all virtual on Zoom, and also all of the content and resources that we offer. And of course, I have a whole bunch of things you can look at for consulting, which I would be happy to help you get to the next phase in your own business. All right, so just to cover the mastermind one more time, if I've not already beaten a dead horse here, we have 65 members as of today. You get access to the private Podio workspace, where our members all communicate via the forum and the activity feed. We have the event calendar, all the different events in the marketplace, not just our events, but anything else that's coming up. Actually had one member who you may know, Matt Kelly, who's an amazing researcher in the business. He just posted a new event, which I'm going to add to the calendar. We've got a vendor database, case study details on all the case studies that we review on this show. We go into more detail in the mastermind membership. We've got a county and state database, which includes every county and state and all the relevant details for note investors. Then we've got inventory records, which correlate to the case studies that we do. There's actually like 9,000 or something inventory records in here. Whole bunch of content there, future case studies, and a good resource to look at so you can determine market pricing and some other details. Then, of course, document templates where we share calculators on amortization schedules or different types of documents you can use to work with your borrower. And then the aggregated trade desk, where we've listed over 11 billion of unpaid principal balance from across the marketplace. Now, I would highly recommend you join now so you can lock in the rate. There's only 2 more slots available at $80 per month. Then we increase to $90 for the next 10 members, and then 100, then 110, it keeps increasing. So check out FIXnotes.com/MNM or FIXnotes.com/mastermind to see the sales page, which has a whole bunch more details, some testimonials, other information that will make that decision much easier for you. Trust me, this is the best value in the business, 100% bar none. The mastermind group is the place to be if you are serious about mortgage note investing. Or if you just want half price consulting and you want me to help you with your business, even if it's mortgage note unrelated, it would still pay dividends to join the group. So definitely check that out. All right, so for members who are already in the group, podio.com/fixnotes/mastermind is how you access all of our content. And then for those of you who are just getting into it, go to fixnotes.com/MNM. Awesome. So that's it for the show today. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I'm always so happy to present the show. Actually, I already did this whole episode at 1 p.m. today as scheduled, and there were some audio difficulties. So this is take 2. It's a double header today. I'm going to delete the other one because the audio just didn't turn out very good. But if you have any questions at all and you're watching this as a recording, please just leave a comment below this video and I will respond to it on YouTube as soon as I can. And if you want to tune in for our next live episode on June 30th, you can chat with me live. We actually had a couple of people chatting in take 1 of the show at 1 p.m. today. So I was able to interact actually with someone who's live in the chat, asking some questions. And that was a lot of fun. It makes things a little bit more lively, I think, for me to have some spontaneous communication. So thank you so much for tuning in, for checking out the episode. I'm going to just look at these feeders again just to see if we get any other friends out there. And let's take a look at the backyard. So the next step here to finish the show off, and I'm very excited because in take 1 of the episode, my GoPro that's out there on the koi pond actually went dead. So I'm going to run out there. I'm going to feed the fish, and you can get a over the head view of my hairline, which should be fun as well. And until next time, thank you so much for joining us, and I will be out there in just a minute. See you soon.